us. I think it's the first time I'm speaking to you on the morning agenda, but we're very happy
Okay.
to have you. Miss,
So am I. Happy to be here.
yes, Mr. Bunting. Um, I mentioned at the start of the program, there's a story in today's newspaper about the police in Hanover um, introducing religious components in their crimes fighting. I'm going to resist the temptation to ask you about that. So I'm going to speak to.
Well, I haven't seen the story, to be honest with you, so I wouldn't have much context. So
I couldn't help remember that during the time when you were national security minister, you spoke about divine intervention. I found it very curious that on the same day that I'm speaking with you, that report came in the newspaper. But I'm going to
but
resist that.
but you know, we're a country that routinely starts all our meetings and our events with prayer.
Yes,
And,
certainly.
and and yet those same people, when you're praying, what are you doing? You're asking for divine intervention.
And I am sure when the police huddle together for before they go out on operations, they pray.
Exactly. So,
And
it's interesting how that was treated.
yes. Anyway, let's talk about the other things. You are commending the opposition. I don't think you had much choice, objectively speaking, but to look at the data and also to commend the JCF, and you have done that, and I think that's commendable of the opposition to do. We're in an election year. Of course, the issue of crime reduction and crime fighting and comparing parties in terms of who handles it best is something that is of great concern to Jamaicans and continue to be. Let's start off with your take on the country's current state under the portfolio issue of crime within the larger context of the reductions.
I think we've made good strides in the last, I would say, 4 quarters, 4 to 5 quarters. I think I heard somewhere that you're a lawyer by profession.
I am.
So you might appreciate more than most persons that for a number of years, probably intensifying the most in 2023, the opposition has been objecting to the serial and routine use of states of emergency as a crime fighting tool. And we've taken the government to court around it. Other individuals have taken it. There are a number of court cases related to the use of the states of emergency, and we've stopped supporting the extension of the 14-day, which is all a government can call on its own. And they usually come back for a 90-day extension. And the opposition in the Senate in particular has been able to, by not supporting the government, prevent the continued extensive use. Since that time is when we have seen the reductions in murders in Jamaica. In 2024, the figure that they ended up at, I think it was about 1,129 or 30. That was just above the average of the 4 years of the PNP's previous administration. For the 8 years prior to that, with the extensive use of states of emergency, the murders were averaging 25% higher. And this is in the context of a time when the Ministry of National Security has 3 times the budget that we did during our period of fiscal austerity. So clearly you were putting in more resources, but the results were worse. So what you were trying was just not working. But there was some kind of doctrinal attachment to the states of emergency that the government refused to accept what the data was showing, that it really wasn't having an impact in bringing down murders. Since that has ceased, I mean, there have been 1 or 2 14-day sort of performative states of emergency, but nothing like the extensive, wasteful ones where had 24-hour checkpoints at every entry to a parish and all of that really wasn't having any meaningful impact other than appearing to be doing something. And, I have no hesitation in commending the new commissioner and the approach the JCF is taking now, which is really focusing on the knitting, doing the work of professional police officers, having patrols for deterrence, doing proper intelligence collection, putting cases together that can stand up in court, targeting those who are the most prolific violence producers. I put that in quote because I think it
police
was
language.
Yes, I want to be careful of I know the judiciary are very wary of labeling people, and I know where they're coming from. But when your intelligence says that this person or this gang is responsible for a disproportionate amount of shootings or murders, then obviously that's where your attention must be focused. And I think that's what I see happening now. And the distraction of the performative press conferences every time a state of emergency is announced or renewed, and the Prime Minister, flanked by CDS and Commissioner trying to look tough. I mean, those days are largely behind us, thankfully. And we're seeing the results of professional policing.
That's interesting. I have some follow-up questions for you from that. One is interesting that you mentioned doctrinal attachment regarding the states of emergency. I would call it an ideological or policy difference, and I want you to explain to our listeners what's the difference, what's the stance of the PMP regarding state of emergency, why it is that you do not support it as a policing tool, and also within that context of responding to that, the idea of the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, who blamed the opposition that the lives which were lost during that time where you have failed to support the state of emergency, they're blaming you guys for that.
Well, first of all, the data doesn't support that. The lives that were lost, the murder rate was much higher during the period when they were using the state of emergency than since it has ceased. In fact, we saw, I forget the percentage last year, was something like a 25% reduction. And this year, for the first quarter so far, there's a further 35% reduction. So the data doesn't support that, first of all. Secondly, we had an opinion from very learned counsel that this serial and routine use was unconstitutional. And this was consistent with my own understanding and our own understanding as legislators of the Constitution on the face of it. And this was supported by Mike Hilton in his opinion. So we felt that if you have a constitutional tool that's to be used only in exceptional emergencies, and the Constitution speaks to what? Basically it is a state of insurrection when the country, life as normal and the institutions as normal cannot function. That's when a state of emergency is to be used. For example, in the 2010 Tivoli operations, when the police themselves, the state itself, was under assault. So we are not against the idea of ever using a state of emergency because there are circumstances which justify it. But using it as an everyday tool, month after month, year after year, that was never the intention of the Constitution. And those of us who voted to pass the Charter of Rights in 2011, which covers now the use of states of emergency or states of public emergency.
The government has
there was a third limb to your question, which could you remind me of it?
I don't remember it, to be honest. We'll just move on.
These compound questions, but they give me them one at a time.
All right. We'll move on from that because the government has also criticized the opposition for wanting to claim credit for the reduction in crime, which they say you ought not to take any credit for. I'm going to give you the context now in which they say when you were in power, the police force was underfunded. You admit they have increased the funding to the police force. The police force is now, in terms of resources, a large amount of money has been spent in terms of infrastructure, resources, etc. And that is also being attributed for the reduction in crime. Your response to that?
There is no doubt that not just the Ministry of National Security, but every ministry was underfunded during the 2012 to early 2016 administration of the PNP. But why was that? Because we had inherited an economy that was a basket case that they had messed up between 2007 and 2011. That is not my opinion. Go to the IMF reports. And I going from memory, but the quotation was the country was on the verge of an economic meltdown. That's what we inherited. And we had to implement the most austere fiscal program, perhaps of any country, because Jamaica had lost so much credibility with the IMF and with the international lending agencies like the World Bank and IDB, etc., that we had to do everything up front. All the austerity measures we had to do up front. So yes, we were in a tremendous fiscal bind, but the reforms we did then, and by the time we left office, were already bearing fruit in terms of giving much more fiscal space to this JLP administration and reducing. The debt was already on a downward trajectory. They have continued to follow the program we left. We had established fiscal rules, etc., in legislation. And that is what has allowed now there to be more resources for spending. But that has nothing to do with any decision. We had a much smaller pie. So you could, when you share it up, of course, each slice was going to be smaller for the ministry.
Would the PMP commit, is it a commitment of the PMP to continue the level of spending as the JLP government currently is in an investment in the national security apparatus of the country?
The commitment of the PNP is to maintain fiscal discipline. There is a discretionary spend in every budget. And when I say discretionary, this is after you pay the compulsory things. You service your debt, you pay salaries and rent and utilities. You know, after you pay the compulsory things, which are compulsory in the short term anyway, there's a discretionary element of over 300 billion, which deals with the programs and the priorities of each administration. Now, we're obviously going to use that discretionary element in some different ways. Why else would people elect our party to form the government if we were going to come and do the same thing that the JLP is doing, maintain the same bureaucratic morass that is choking business? If we were going to continue the neglect of our health and education systems to get the outcomes that we're seeing now, where our KPH is literally falling apart, where less than 1 in 5 of our graduates from high school meet the school leaving criteria of 5 CXE with math and English. If we were going to continue that, then what would we be campaigning on? We're obviously going to change much of that. And in terms of the Ministry of National Security in particular, what I would say is there has been a overemphasis on the military to the detriment of the police. And that was because the states of emergency, which brought the military into sort of a day-to-day autonomous operational role, required much more resources to go to the military. But as I've said many times in public previously, the military cannot replace the police. A soldier cannot replace a policeman. They have different roles. They're trained differently.
I'm going to ask you to hold that point for us. I'm up on the break, so I'm going to take the break and come back right after the break. Stay with us, listeners. We're speaking with Senator Peter Bunting, opposition spokesman on citizen security.
We're going to take a quick commercial break here on the Make We Talk program. We're getting a simulcast broadcast from Power 106 with opposition spokesperson on citizen security, Senator Peter Bunting. We'll be right back. Stand by.
I do not believe that the Jamaica Labour Party is a party that is humanitarian. I don't think they think about the human factor.
Do you think the opposition has a chance in the next general election?
The best chance the opposition ever know. I think that charisma
is exactly.
Andrew B. But if you have a look at intelligence, Mark Gordon is no disrespect to Burgard, and I hope nobody take this as no. But if you look from basic understanding and basic conversation, like Andrew Holness, we say this something nicer. Mark Golding is more of the people than Andrew Holness. I think that Andrew Holness is very pretentious. You understand me? I think that he plays the part of the man of the people better. Underemployment is worse than unemployment, because if you're working less than what it costs you to live and go to work, that is underemployment.
For staying with us right here on the morning agenda on Power 106 FM. I'm Kemoy McEachron. We continue our discussion now, speaking with opposition spokesman on citizen security, Senator Peter Bunting. Mr. Bunting, just before the break, you were actually responding to my question, and I'm going to rephrase it for you. You were at the point of talking about military, a lot of emphasis on the military due to the operations of the states of emergency. I'm going to go back to my question. It's not just good enough for the opposition, the PMP, to say that we are committed to fiscal discipline. And while I agree with you that policies makes the difference between parties and governments, it is important, especially in this election, for certain things to be maintained. And for example, under this portfolio, we see that the current government had changed even the allocation of spending and budgetary allocations for the national security, and moved it and put it under certain areas of the budget, which would mean, for example, that the police and the defense system will always have the resources rather than it being moved discretionary.
No, that's a misunderstanding. If that's your understanding, it's a misunderstanding. If you're repeating what you've heard the government spinmeisters saying, let me clear it up for you. There is no greater priority on the Ministry of National Security now than during our time. The numbers, the allocations have increased, but they have also increased to every other ministry. If you look at taking out debt servicing and the Ministry of Finance's operations, the lion's share of the budget was to education, health, and national security. And usually education, I think, has managed to maintain a slight edge, and health and national security swap second and third from year to year. But they're all in the same ballpark. So there's nothing today that is any different in terms of the proportion of the budget allocated to national security. All that has happened is that the budget itself has grown over the last 9 years, with inflation and also with better revenue collection, because you remember some of the, this government keeps talking about no new taxes. They don't need new tax measures because the majority of the taxes are coming from GCT, SCT, the special consumption tax, general consumption tax. Most of the taxes are indexed to inflation. So each year they will increase automatically. We'll also put a lot of other measures to make tax collection more efficient. And those are more technical measures, which I don't need to go into to divert to this morning. But there is nothing now that's any different in terms of prioritization, in terms of proportion of the budget that's going to national security than during our time.
All right, let me move on from that. The issue twin to that is the government's tough stance on crime. And they have used, for example, or made mention of, for example, the El Salvador model. Going back to the same point where in an election year, crime remains a top issue coming from a survey regarding Jamaicans. How do you see or project the PMP position itself in terms of its position regarding tackling Jamaica's crime problem in comparison to what we have experienced over the last two administrations?
Well, as I said, what the government would like us to do is to forget the first 8 or 9 years of their performance and focus on the last 3 months. But you must be held accountable for your term in office. More Jamaicans have been murdered in the 2 terms of Andrew Holness's administration than under any other prime minister or any other 2 terms. So let us start by that. Objectively, the prime minister has that dubious distinction of being the prime minister under whose leadership the most Jamaicans have been murdered. For the first 8 years, it was 25% higher than the average of what he inherited from the PNP administration. 8 years, 25% higher. That translates to 2,300 more Jamaicans murdered than if he had just maintained the average that he inherited. Last year, the first year under Commissioner Kevin Blake and the first year without the extensive use of states of emergency, it fell back to the average or just above the average of where it was under the PNP. And this quarter is the first quarter that we have seen significant reductions. 3 months. So tell me now, if I use the analogy of a business and you were a shareholder and you had a CEO who had interviewed for the job on the basis of you being able to sleep with your windows and doors open, and you gave that CEO more capital, more share capital to work with than any previous CEO, and then for the next 8 years, he lost money, and then broke even in year 9, and then showed you profit for 1 quarter, would you say that performance is satisfactory?
You know, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Bunting, I understand the point that you're making, except that I have a challenge in this fact that we're talking about Jamaican lives, and one life that is lost is one too many.
And I'm told you 2,300 more were lost in the 8. So I don't understand this. If one life is so important, what about the 2,300 above the previous?
And that is the point I'm making, because I'm not in the business of sharing responsibility, because governments are continuous. So the Jamaican people elect the government to ensure that it is safe, whether it's PMP or JLP, and we should not be losing any life at all to crime, and that's the issue that I'm having. But let's move on from that and talk about the social intervention programs and the fact now that the government has shifted its position. Well, the Minister of National Security, to be specific, Mr. Chang, since we haven't heard an official broader position from the government, and talk about the PMP's view on that. I know this is something that under your administration you guys were big on, the Citizen Security and Justice Program, for example, and the PMI. Those projects were discontinued by the JLP in 2019. Funding was cut, for example. Now we hear Dr. Chang going back slightly to that to say that it could help in terms of containing youth being involved in gangs.
We introduced the public health model to violence reduction during the PNP administration from as early as 2013, when we launched Unite for Change. We realized that you need to follow parallel tracks. Yes, you need a crime control efforts, which is primarily responsibility of the security forces, but you also need crime prevention efforts, which required intervention, various types of social interventions and social investments, typically in the communities that were generating most of your violent crime, or where most of your violent crime was occurring. And we maintained those 2 tracks. We invested heavily in the Citizen Security and Justice Program, Unite for Change. We funded from the budget of the Ministry of National Security the Peace Management Initiative, and we got them training in what's called violence interruption, where they had deployed scores of violence interrupters in volatile communities. And the idea was, and it was bearing fruit, that they could often intervene after the first incident, which may not have been a fatal incident. It may have started with a dispute, but quickly these incidents can escalate to violence and then reprisal and counter-reprisal and so on. That's just one type of intervention that we had going. When the GLP came to office, they basically discontinued or stopped funding all of these initiatives. Dr. Chang said on more than one occasion that he didn't believe in these social intervention programs. In fact, a number of community centers in St. James, which were built under the CSJP or with assistance from the CSJP, have been locked up and gates chained up to now. So this sudden Pauline conversion of Dr. Chang, forgive me if I am skeptical about it, because he has shown no appetite, no acknowledgement even before this recent one, that this was a useful and productive allocation of resources.
It's interesting that his conversion, as you'd call it, that way, maybe the scales are falling off his eyes, to continue the analogy, came at the release of the National Crime Victimization Survey. I'm not sure if you have seen that, but it brings out a point about government listening to data and to scientists, because a lot of persons in that area, we see, for example, Project STAR, which is from the private sector, and the results, the data is showing that these programs do work. In light of that, again, an election year, what exactly is the PNP's position, large plank of your manifesto regarding the crime portfolio? What's the difference that you're going to make if elected?
Well, Project STAR, for the benefit of your listeners, is essentially modeled on the Unite for Change and CSJP programs that we were doing, funded by the government during the PNP administration. It has once again demonstrated success. However, the scale of Project STAR is relatively small because it's primarily private sector funded. If you want to make Project STAR a national initiative, under whatever you want to brand it, but whether Unite for Change, Project STAR, under some broader social intervention initiative, you have to put government funding behind it, because right now Project STAR is operating in a few communities, benefiting those communities. But if we were really to identify all the communities that needed the Project STAR type of work, only government funding is going to do that. And we have committed that and this is no deviation from our express policies from our last administration, that we must invest in crime prevention. We must upgrade the human resources in many of these communities, the infrastructure, the housing, the roads, the garbage collection, all of these that contribute, the street lighting, all of these that contribute to a criminogenic environment. The schools, we have to invest in the schools. There's another private sector initiative going on, led by Joe Matala. Very impressive, but again, very impressive results, I should say. But again, on just a micro scale, we need these things to be scaled up nationally to have a real impact on improving the quality of life of the Jamaican people.
All right. Thank you so very much, Senator Peter Bunting, opposition spokesman on citizen security. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
All right, listeners, stay with us. We come back after the break. Of course, it is your agenda on a Wednesday morning. We take your calls. The numbers to call, 876-922-4112-5, as well as the WhatsApp line is 876-279-8598. Soon come.
There you have it, a live interview with opposition spokesperson and national security, Senator Peter Bunting, was speaking there on Power 106. We're not going to go any further with this broadcast because we're just carrying the broadcast with Senator Peter Bunting. But join us this evening at 7 p.m. Jamaica time, 8 p.m. My special guest will be opposition spokesperson on finance, Mr. Julian Robinson. He will be my special guest this evening on the Make We Talk program. I don't want to violate any more of the space pertaining to the broadcast. I wasn't permitted to do this, but I just decided to bring it live to you people. That was Senator Peter Bunting, opposition spokesperson on national security. We're going to also have a live feed with Dr. Alfred Dawes. He had a Beyond the Headline interview yesterday. We're going to bring that to you also. But join me this evening at 7 p.m. or 8 a.m. Sorry, 7 p.m. or Jamaica time or 8 p.m. U.S. time. My special guest on the Murcott Talk Current Affair program will be opposition spokesperson on finance, public service and planning, Mr. Julian Robinson. He will be my special guest this evening. So join me then for that interview when I come on. But throughout today, I will be on throughout today. This is my first program for the day. I'll be coming back on pretty soon. And join me this evening with Head Boy. We'll be speaking to opposition spokesperson on finance, Mr. Julian Robinson. Until you hear our voice again, may God bless you. May God bless our island home, Jamaica land we love. Have a great morning, everyone.
This one says, Mr. McEachron, listening to your program, I can see that you are a balanced host. Help me to understand this a little more. Cuban workers save the lives of Jamaicans while China scrape from us to become richer. Which of the two is more important to Jamaica? That's an interesting question. I probably have to come back to it later. Let's go to the phone lines. Morning, Barry. Morning.
Morning, Chamoy.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I am doing well. Let's do it quickly.
Yes, quickly as you. The issue of crime and politics. One of the reasons why Jamaica have so many crimes over the years is because the political parties, they don't speak with one voice when it comes to crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a competition.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the current administration, they beat their chests and they celebrate when crime reduces. I have nothing against that. And while they're beating their chest, their opponents are silent.
Yes.
And on the reverse, you have it on the reverse, whereby the opposition parties, when they're in power, they beat their chests when crime is down, and the people would remain silent. And so it sends a wrong picture if you're competing to see who failed when it comes to crime during their tenure. And that's not what we want in Jamaica.
Yes.
And no wonder it is said that you have, they said political parties embrace gangs. For example, you have two major gangs in Jamaica, one order and clandestine gang, and people associate them to political
to either political party.
Yes, and it seems sometimes as if they point fingers across the fence to say, your gang is giving most problem, and your gang is what the problem. We need a change. We need to speak in one
voice. I agree
crime.
with you. I agree with you, Barry.
Guns are coming into illegal guns coming into the island. And these gangs, who are these guns coming to? Not the security forces.
Yes.
Illegal underground, and what are they going to do? Commit crimes. So we need to speak with one voice. And I asked the Minister of Security to do that, and Mr. Bunting too. He might very well be the next Minister of Security, but he needs to speak with one voice.
Yes. All of us stand up together and take back our country. Thank you so very much, Barry. All right, let's go now to Sir P. Morning, Sir P.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
No, two things. Just the first one. You mentioned about El Salvador model.
Yes.
Who suggests that?
In terms of what?
You mentioned that.
You didn't hear the Prime Minister talk about El Salvador, for example?
Okay. No, all right. No, I spoke to a friend of mine over the weekend, right? No, the only thing, what happened over the weekend in St. Mary different because they don't detain the people them at the police station because there was a emergency or whatsoever, cardinal search or whatever they call it, right? And 38 people, a youngster was picked up off the road, right? When they went to the police station, 36 of them released, right? And 2 was charged. So what I'm talking about, El Salvador, man, you detain them faster, even if them have tattoo, you said they are gang leaders or whatever the case might be. No, the 36 is they came to, pick them up off the road, just walk in and then go by the house and pick them up. That's exactly what happened because I was surprised if you detain 38 people and when you carry them to the station, 36 of them released without any charge or whatever the case. What model you use or method you use to pick up 38? The next
you
thing
ever hear about dynamite fishing?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Next thing now.
No, I think it was Friday or Thursday, the Chief Justice, right?
Yes.
Failed to decide not to renew the injunction from the PNP, right? And then give the reasons, right?
The injunction was not extended because the both sides agreed to a consent order judgment.
Okay, right.
A consent order, rather.
Yeah. And they're waiting on state 4 or 5 or 6, something in the Constitution, right?
Yes.
Now, yesterday, the motion in Parliament, and the Speaker said they're giving the EOJ until the 31st of May.
Yeah, that's a committee. That's the Boundaries Committee.
Exactly. Now, Mr. Warmington said yesterday, said the new voters list should include the people them by, I think the 31st
of May. Yes.
Yeah. So, the point is, with that one call election before May, right? Now, what surprises me is sometimes Warmington says something and people said, all right, watch out. Come to the conclusion, Jamaica and all said this man said something, him just talk it off and just get up. But then the ruling party, I said, boy, this is the opinion of Warmington and not this.
They don't distance themselves from it.
Exactly. So because of that, right? I'm wondering if it's a decision, right? By the
JLP that election won't be called until after May? That's your question?
No. They vote. The election, the voters list or something. You understand me?
Well, remember, Sir P, that the Prime Minister is the only one who can call election, and he normally keeps it secret, But I agree with you. What the Prime Minister is also, is in the system, it's important to understand how the system works. While that is strictly so, the Prime Minister is also the leader of the party. And when the party sits to meet as an executive, the Prime Minister is well aware they strategize and say, okay, let's do it. So he may not tell them the exact date, but I'm sure based on the planning, there has to be an idea to say it's not going to be before this time or that time.
Exactly.
Because also with that is that they intend to catch opposition off guard.
Yes, when them talk about inclusion of the new people, because what happened, last week, Saturday, the constituency office over the weekend,
But that don't have anything to do with that, though.
No, what I'm saying, you can go and register.
Yes, the deadline was March 31st, but that have nothing to do with the EOJ is separate and independent, and what they're doing is that if the election is due September, they already have their timeline. Remember, the election is constitutional due September, so in order to be on any voters list that is going to be used for the September election, the deadline for registration in order to be on the voters list would have been March 31st based on their administrative work. So
that is true. That is true. You see, but then who to tell, say, whatsoever, because that's what I'm saying, And what surprises me is when they came in Parliament, because, I said, boy, watch out. Give the electoral office the 31st of May, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most likely, people might say, boy, as a caller said earlier on, but act of God, the election can go beyond September, right?
Yes.
But when they mention about the 31st, to get back to them, it could be an election in July.
Well, it could be also, but also remember the election can't go beyond September. So if you use the September timeline,
God.
Yes. So if we use the September timeline, May is still in there as well. Anyway, That's
Okay,
it?
sir. Cool.
All right, let's go to Metro now. Morning, Metro.
Morning, Mr. Murcott.
How are you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm good, man. Just a few points there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some time ago, the Prime Minister made a pronouncement that the park in Portmore is 50% complete. Have you ever passed over there? Have you ever had the chance to pass there and look over there? Or you don't live? You don't know? You don't come Portmore side?
I what if I tell you that I pass it almost every day?
And you look over there. In your opinion, that park is 50% complete?
I have no expertise in construction. I see buildings over there and I see workers over
No,
there.
man, you come and say, don't take no.
I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know. I can't tell you if it's 50% or not.
The park is going to mirror Emancipation Park. Trees are going to be there, grass is going to be there, and the building is going to be there.
Yes.
Common sense. I'm asking you now to use the common sense, which sometimes is not so common with a lot of people.
Yes.
Looking at that park, you think it is 50% completed?
But Metro, what I'm saying, I can't tell. Number one, what are you going to use to judge it? You're going to judge the building or you're going to use the trees? Because if you're talking about the trees and the grass, as far as I'm aware, they're not going to plant the trees from scratch because trees take a long time to grow. So they're going to bring the trees already grown as well as the grass. You know how they do it in America? You ever see how they lay grass in America? That you have concrete here tonight and tomorrow morning you wake up and you have fresh grass?
Yeah.
Okay. So
artificial grass, they can put
it's not artificial grass, but how they do grass nowadays, you lay it. Hold on. You lay it like carpet, so it comes rolled up with the dirt and you just put it down.
I'll give you that, but looking at the park itself, looking at the thing, even if they're going to put up, you can put concrete, you can put artificial grass with a mound of dirt and all them type of thing there, and how the place looking.
And that's what I say. I don't know if it's artificial grass. I don't know. The Prime Minister, who knows the plans,
you know
says it's 50%.
I find you people give politicians too much slack, you know. You guys are opinion shapers in this country. I don't give them too much slack, you know.
So what is your opinion, Metro? You think that it is not?
I am saying that park is not even 20% completed.
And that is from your observation?
Of course, I'm a sensible man. I'm not a fool.
Yes.
Looking at it, I am not a fool.
Yes.
And I've been around long enough to know when that thing is going to be completed or when it is not completed.
All right. Well, we'll wait and see because there was a deadline given. It says it would open in the summer, so we'll see.
I don't know. Another point, but nobody going to take him to task if it don't open.
All right. Before you move on to another point, you're going to have to hold on first. I'm going to take the break and come back. Stay with us, listeners. We'll take the break now and come back. Stay with us right here on the Morning Agenda.
Okay. Thank you all very much for listening. This is where we say so long. Join me on the other side for an exciting episode of the Make We Talk program. We're coming up now. It is now 9:45, 9:46. Join us later on as we come up with an exciting episode of the Make We Talk program. That was an interview with Senator Peter Bunting done by a radio station in Jamaica. We brought that to you live on the behalf of all of us here. Thank you all very much for joining us. God bless you. May God bless our island home, Jamaica land we love. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Make We Talk Jeffrey Tavares YouTube channel. And also remember to join us this evening at 7 p.m. Jamaica time, 8 p.m. US time for an exciting episode, an exciting interview with Opposition Spokesperson Finance, the PNP, Julian Robinson. I'm Jeffrey Tavares saying so long. Good morning.
Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represents yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affects the life of our nation, uncover the truth. Make we reason. Make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va. No upper echelon. Nobody is not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica. Make we talk. Make we talk. Unity is strength. Make we reason. Make we talk. If we see corruption in any shape or form, we're going to highlight it. Make we talk. Jeffrey Tavares represent yard and broad and the entire diaspora. As long as it affect the life of our nation, uncover the truth, make we reason, make we talk. And we don't care about no vumva viva va, no upper echelon, nobody's not above the law. As long as it not help Jamaica, make we talk. Make we talk.